need to tell you a little bit about Mistletoe Rescue. It's part of what they call a multi-author project, all with mistletoe in the theme, and had to be set around Christmas. And considering that I was coming out of author burnout, it was lovely to write something fun that I'd actually been thinking about doing for a number of years. Zack Jarvie is the friend of Mackenzie's from Swing Vote. And I decided to set his story in between the ending of that book, where there's a shooting, and the epilogue. So time-wise, it's fitting, and it lets everybody see what happened to him, because the last we know after Swing Vote was that Zack had been shot, but that he would survive. But setting it during the Christmas time period was a fun way to do it, and to introduce a character he had known before and had come in contact with again. It's, I think my top word count was only 23,000 words. So it's not a broad story. So if you haven't listened to the audiobook for Swing Vote, you ought to, because that will teach you a lot about Zack. But this book is written by the narrator who did the expanded version of A Change of Plans, and she's also the one who's done the other two books in the Safe Harbor series, The Widow and the Professor and Whispers of Forever. So I hope you enjoy this story.
Mistletoe Rescue by Donna K. Weaver. Narrated by Vicki Pierce. Chapter 1. Holly Richardson thought the biggest challenge on her first evening shift at the Canyondale emergency room would be to stay awake. The staff said so, and it was a weeknight after all, in a place with a population of about 5,000 people. After working at a super busy hospital in a high-crime area of Denver, this little green oasis, surrounded by the red rock country of eastern Utah, should be just what she needed. She had helped the ER doctor set a child's broken leg. Elderly Dr. Miller said little, but he knew what he was doing and treated the little boy with kindness. When they finished and the doctor had returned to his office, Holly cleaned up the room to prepare for the next patient. She then reported back to the charge nurse for something else to do. "I'll bet this is a very different experience from what you had in Denver," Kathy Salazar said, glancing up from her desk. She pointed to the nearby chair. "Definitely." Holly sat, grateful for having such a great supervisor for her first shift here. Since their introduction a few days earlier, Kathy had kindly suggested the best places to eat and shop in town. She talked to Holly more like a friend than a boss. "In Denver, we saw way too many shooting and stabbing victims, drug overdoses, and assaults. We also had patients who waited too long to see a doctor because they didn't have insurance. I'm really looking forward to a quieter life around here." "Well, Canyondale isn't exactly heaven, so don't get your hopes up too high." Kathy leaned back in her chair. "We've experienced quite a bit of growth in the last few years, and tensions are running high at the moment. We also have a ton more tourists coming here now, so we may see more victims of hiking and four-wheeler accidents. It shouldn't be anything like what you saw in Denver, though." "I can deal with that." Holly hoped that seeing patients who had been injured while doing something fun would be better than treating those hurt through anger or neglect. "Have you had any luck yet finding a place closer to rent than price?" Holly groaned. "No, and I didn't expect to have an hour-long commute each way. I guess living in a big city made me expect to find housing close by. I was lucky to already be in my apartment before the boom hit from the construction of the technology center. Have you put your name on the waiting list for the new apartment complex?" Kathy asked. Yes, but that's months away from completion. For now, I found a basement apartment in Price with a couple of college students, but they're total slobs. Holly rubbed her temples. I'm no Ben Wyatt, but I pick up after myself, and I enjoy cleaning, but not like this. That's rough, Kathy grinned. You've watched this old show, Parks and Rec? My friend Mackenzie works for the city, and you should hear her compare real city council meetings with the ones in the show. Holly hardly knew anyone in the town yet, except the hospital HR director and Dr. Miller, who had interviewed her. And Kathy, of course. I'd like to meet her sometime. Oh, you will. I'll let you know if I hear about any local apartments opening sooner. Kathy pointed to the computer at the nurse's station. Since you've already gone through the hospital's policies and procedures, I'd like you to review patient charts to verify proper documentation. You can get familiar with how we do things while making sure we've done them correctly. Great. Holly returned to the desk and woke the computer. As she worked, she saw the wisdom of the exercise, though others had done the task in Denver. For a small facility, the Canyondale staff's attention to detail impressed her. She was just thinking about getting up to walk around when Kathy's phone rang. She gasped, and Holly jumped to her feet, concerned at how white the other nurse's face had turned. Kathy's hand shook as she hung up. There's been a live shooter incident at City Hall. A sick feeling of déjà vu settled on Holly, and her heart twisted. Kathy would know these people. Do you need me to ride with the ambulance? Holly asked. Kathy shook her head. I don't know how many victims they might send to the hospital, so I need you here. When Dr. Miller rushed from his office, Kathy updated him on the situation and her decision to go to City Hall. Is that wise? Don't your friends normally attend those meetings? He asked with a frown. Yes, but Holly has the most experience in a busy ER, and I'm afraid we're going to get very busy. Good point. Let's get ready, Dr. Miller declared. Aching at the fear in Kathy's eyes, Holly gave her arm a soft squeeze before hurrying after the doctor. The too familiar tightness in her belly stole the excitement she'd been feeling about living in this small town. If even Canyondale could have mass shootings, moving here was a mistake. She and Dr. Miller leaped into a frenzy of preparations. Only a few minutes later, and before their reinforcements could get there, the first victim arrived. The tight faces of the paramedics made sense when Holly realized the young men wore a similar county uniform to theirs. After they transferred him to the exam table and left the room, Dr. Miller signaled Holly, and they went to work. The victim appeared to be about her age. Sadly, she had too much experience with this kind of thing, and she made suggestions as she and the doctor carefully removed the soft armor vest. After cutting off the man's shirt underneath, they found the vest had mostly done its job by absorbing the force of the impact. As expected, the bullet hadn't penetrated it, but the energy had caused a significant amount of blunt force trauma. His chest already showed signs of bruising, and it would surprise her if he didn't have some broken ribs. Hopefully, none had pierced a lung. An X-ray or CT scan would tell if he had other internal injuries as well. The bullet also appeared to have fragmented from the impact. Fortunately, the pieces had only caused a few minor cuts, but some were deep enough to require stitches. The young man tried to say something, but Holly couldn't make out his words. What was that? She leaned closer, turning her ear to his mouth. Holly? He whispered. Startled that he knew her name, she looked at his face rather than his injuries. For a moment, memories returned her to the summers when she was 16 and 17, and they had worked together as youth camp counselors. Zack Jarvie. Her first kiss. "I didn't see it coming," he mumbled, bringing her back to the present. "I've known Hank since I was a kid, and he shot me with a rifle." Zack fumbled to lift his hand so to touch her face. "Are you an angel? Am I dead?" Holly clasped it and eased it to his side again. "No, Zack, you're not dead, and you'll be good as new in no time." She glanced up at the doctor, pleading that she wasn't lying. "The important thing is your vest did its job." Dr. Miller wore a pinched expression, his eyes troubled as he signaled for an orderly to take Zack to radiology. As Holly realized the doctor would know the shooter, too, she felt even sicker. Could she not get away from this kind of violence? Another nurse had checked in. She and Holly were helping a few walk-ins who'd arrived from the council meeting when the second ambulance drove up. Dr. Miller signaled for Holly to join him again, entreating the young woman with flaming orange curls that clashed horribly with the red splattered on her clothing and hands. "Ah, Turk, no," Dr. Miller said with a groan as he quickly examined her for injuries, besides the one on her forehead covered with a bandage. "Where did all the blood come from?" Emotion threatened to overwhelm Holly at the pain in his voice. Her experience in Denver had nearly broken her, and she had treated no one she knew. She didn't know this woman, so why did Holly feel like the grief on the edges of her heart would overwhelm her? Because Dr. Miller did. Was she an empath or something, unable to separate herself from the surrounding pain? The doctor carefully removed the bandage from the victim's forehead and examined the wound. Holly had seen enough gunshot damage to recognize it there. It looked like the bullet had merely grazed her skin near the hairline, though a scan would be needed to check for a skull fracture or intracranial bleeding. "Well, we'll keep radiology plenty busy tonight," Dr. Miller said grimly. Before Holly could respond, Kathy entered the ER, her normal olive complexion pale, her face pinched. "Glad to see you're back," the doctor said, surprisingly matter-of-fact. "I hope that means we've seen all the injured." "One council member was DOA," Kathy said, her voice tight. "The other ambulance is bringing another with a gunshot wound. Both are newcomers. You need to check out the mayor. I think he had a heart attack." The intercom blared. "Code Blue, ER Exam Room 3, Code Blue." Kathy dashed away. Dr. Miller hurried after her, but called over his shoulder, "Holly, see that Turk gets to radiology." Holly glanced down at the woman the doctor had called Turk, who lay with her eyes closed, her brows pinched. Holly checked outside the exam room and spotted an orderly returning with Zack. "Is he finished with radiology?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Will he need surgery?" "They said no, just stitches." "Good. Return him to room 2, but then I need you to take this patient to radiology." Holly pointed to the door. "Will do." Another doctor and a couple more nurses had arrived to help, so Holly went to the ER nurses' station to see if anyone needed her attention first. She had finished reviewing the information when Dr. Miller spoke behind her. "Holly, I'm ready for you in room 2. She followed him. Zack lay on the bed with his eyes closed, but at the sound of the door opening, he turned his head toward them. His lids open a slit. "How bad is it?" Zack asked. "You have a couple of broken ribs and will need stitches. There are likely some contusions on organs, which isn't uncommon, so we'll keep you overnight for observation." "I guess that's why I hurt so bad." Dr. Miller continued speaking as he went to work, stitching the shrapnel's damage. When the doctor finished, he pulled off his gloves, saying, "And now I'll have a little chat with your parents who are in the waiting room. Once you're in a room, I'll send them up to you." "Thanks, Doc." As soon as he left, Zack extended an arm toward her. I'm not imagining you, am I? Holly only hesitated a moment before placing her hand in his. I'm really here. I didn't remember you were from Canyondale. Or did you move here? Born and raised here. I had no idea you were working at our hospital. Tonight is my first shift. His warm response softened the tension in her body. Just like at camp, he'd had a way of bringing her down when she had problems with the campers. Something in the way he watched her kept her from admitting tonight could be her last shift. The trembling had already started, and she worried the nightmares would begin again. So, you live here now? He asked, though his pain medications made him sound drowsy. I have a temporary place in Price. Holly explained about the housing situation and what Kathy had said. Do you know her? Humor flashed across Zack's eyes, the corner of his mouth quirking up. All my life. We were part of the fearsome threesome. Then he opened his eyes wider, more awake. You sound doubtful. You aren't thinking of leaving already, are you? The uncomfortable sense of panic she'd grown familiar with at her old job kept Holly from speaking. She couldn't handle it again, especially not if she had to watch people she knew and cared about going through this. But what could she do? She had cut off everything in Denver, including all contact with her family. She had nowhere else to go. No, Holly, please don't leave yet, Zack mumbled as he struggled to stay awake. Promise me you'll give us a chance. It's not usually like this. His eyes closed, and she thought he had dozed off. All she wanted was to get far, far away from here. She tried to ease her hand from his, but his grip tightened. Stay, he whispered. At least for a little while. Promise me. As he had all those years ago, something in him seemed to run from his hand to hers. How could a man in this condition transfer strength to her? It forced back the fear, loosening the knot in her stomach so her breaths came more easily. Holly whispered, I promise. Chapter 2. 4 months later. Hurrying from the sheriff's office, Zack shot another glance at the time on his wrist phone. His shift had run over because of paperwork, and he would have to hurry to reach Holly's new apartment. After all this time, the night had finally arrived to help her move into her new apartment in Canyondale. Never, when he'd begged her to stay, had he imagined how little they would actually get to see each other. Between his loving but smothering family during his recovery from the shooting and Holly's long shifts and commute to Price, their relationship, if he could even call it that, had mostly been long distance. That was about to change. He hoped. As he drove to the new complex, Zack tried to keep his nervous excitement to a reasonable level. He was counting on things between them to take off, finally, now they would be living so close. Like next door close. Not that he'd mentioned it to her yet. He only found out about it himself when he'd picked up his keys at lunch. Hopefully, she would take it well. Zack pulled into the empty stall in front of his new place. After living in a dark basement apartment with a window he could barely squeeze out of in an emergency, he looked forward to this new adventure. Even more now that he was seeing so many people he knew moving in, including some young families in the adjacent building with larger units. At Kathy's urging, Holly had given him a key to her place so he could have it open and ready when they arrived from Price with her belongings. He grabbed the housewarming basket his mother had helped him put together. It included a holiday fleece throw, a scented diffuser, and a local hot chocolate sampling box, since he knew how much she liked the gourmet ones. Stepping inside, he inhaled. enjoying the smell. Sure, it was full of chemicals from the paint, carpet, and wood, but it was new. His second great-grandfather had built Zack's childhood home, so the closest he'd ever gotten to this new smell was whenever they painted a room. He even owned a used truck. He had barely put the basket on the kitchen counter when he heard an engine right outside. Zack said a silent prayer that Holly wouldn't hate having him for a neighbor, especially since they'd each signed one-year leases. Zack and Kathy had expected to rent a moving truck, but Holly had assured them a pickup truck would be more than enough. Acting as a guide for Kathy as she backed in, he scanned the boxes in the trunk bed. Holly must have sold most of everything she owned before leaving Colorado. With raised eyebrows, Zack met Kathy's gaze through the rearview mirror. She shrugged. Did this mean Holly didn't plan to set down roots here? She hopped out of the vehicle first, so he asked, "Where's your bed?" "I don't have one yet." Holly's cheeks flushed, and she wouldn't meet his gaze. "I've been sleeping on an air mattress." Seriously? She had done that for the past 4 months in a shared apartment with college students? He glanced at Kathy, who had joined them. The look she gave him held a challenge. Well, fine. Zack knew just how to fix the furniture problem. He undid the latch on the pickup and asked, "Do any of these boxes have books in them?" "You remembered how much I love to read." Holly grinned, finally looking at him. "But no, before I left, I donated all my books to the local library. My collection now is either e-book or audio. I plan to build a new one, so you don't have to worry about hurting your back." If she only knew how many heavy people he had to lift on rescue missions. The three of them made quick work of moving Holly's possessions inside the apartment. As Zack lifted the last box, Kathy grabbed his sleeve. "I need to get this truck back, so I'll leave you to help Holly unpack." She leaned closer. "We all want her to stay here." He pulled a face. It wasn't like he didn't want the same thing. Why did she make it sound like it would be his fault if Holly left? "You're preaching to the choir." "Then make her want to stay here." Kathy smacked his arm and wiggled her eyebrows before striding to the driver's door. "Tell Holly I'll see her Monday." Zack entered the apartment again and found Holly going through the gift basket. "This is from you? It's so sweet." She surprised him by throwing her arms around his neck. He automatically returned the embrace. It sent him back to those last few days they'd spent together at camp after they finally admitted their feelings. It felt so good to hold her again. Holly's body must remember too, because she molded herself against him. It took him a few seconds before he realized she was crying. "Holly," he whispered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She buried her face in his neck, like she used to do when embarrassed. Zack expected her to pull away, but she didn't, so he continued to hold her. If this was what she needed, he would stand here all night. What could he do to give her more experiences that made her feel welcome and wanted? Almost instantly came the answer. A secret Santa. As soon as she moved, he dropped his arms. "I ordered pizza." "You didn't have to do that," she said, wiping those glorious blue eyes. Since the first time he'd met her all those years ago, he could lose himself in them. "I wanted to." He looked at her round, full lips, wanting so badly to taste them again. But Zack forced himself to keep his hands at his side as he met her gaze instead. "We have about 45 minutes before dinner gets here. My mom always told my older siblings to get their kitchens and bedrooms functional first. Where do you want to start?" Oh, my word. Holly's body tingled from being in Zack's arms again. It might have been 8 years, but her physical attraction to him hadn't dimmed. Not one bit. If anything, she found him more desirable than all those years ago. Even after recovering from a gunshot wound, he was buff in a lean sort of way, strong, protective. "Let's start with the kitchen," she finally said, picking up a box labeled kitchen. "But as you can see, I don't own all that much. When I left my old life behind, I dumped anything with memories." As soon as the words left her mouth, Holly knew she had opened a door she didn't want to go through. Before Zack could ask for more details, she hurried on. "It was liberating to get rid of it. I've even thought about getting a tiny house. I could be a travel nurse." He grabbed the other box and hurried after her. "You aren't still thinking about doing that, are you?" The worry in his voice sent a myriad of emotions flooding through Holly, including happiness at being wanted and guilt for not having appreciated what he offered. If nothing else, they could be friends. "No," she said. "It was just a passing thought. About the traveling, anyway. Though I might enjoy living in a tiny house." Zack's shoulders relaxed, and he opened his box. "I've seen a few of those videos. Since having the outdoors as another room, it might work here, unless the weather's bad. And when it's bad here, it's bad. Both the heat of summer and the occasional freak cold snap in the winter." "Then I'm extra glad I won't have to make the commute to Price anymore. I've had worse drives, but it was boring." "Especially when combined with fatigue after a long shift." As Zack removed a container of hot chocolate, he shuddered. "I've seen way too many accidents after people fell asleep while driving." "And I've helped treat more than enough of them." Holly glanced at him. "Do you like your job?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "Which one? I have 2 of them now that I'm helping with rescue flights." "Kathy mentioned how busy those are getting." Holly placed her few pieces of cutlery in a drawer. "How can you do both?" "I won't forever. Eventually, I hope to do the rescue flights full time. The 2 pilots are former Marines and are always joking about people not shooting at them anymore." Zack ran a hand over his chest, and something dark flashed across his eyes as he stared off, likely remembering that night. "I'm sorry," Holly began, but he shook his head. "Believe it or not, one of the most dangerous calls we go on is for a domestic disturbance. Even in a town of only about 5,000, we get more than you might think. The guy knocks his wife or girlfriend around, so she calls us. But when we get there and try to take him into custody, she's suddenly jumping all over us. No one's ever pulled a gun on me over that, but several of the other deputies have faced it." Zack's face had turned grim. "I won't miss that part of the job." Holly found herself staring at this grown-up version of Zack. She couldn't help comparing his bravery to Brett's lack of it. The coward hadn't even had the guts to be honest with her. "Do you have anything else for the kitchen?" Zack asked, pulling her from her thoughts. "This is it," she said. "Except for my bedroom and bathroom, I have little else." "You need a real bed." Zack headed toward the bedroom. "I can't believe you've slept on an air mattress all these months." Holly hurried after him. "I actually prefer an air mattress over springs, and mine is a double high, so it's not all that different from a regular bed." "Well, you already worked a long shift today and then had to move. Let's get your bed together so you can get some sleep." He lifted the rolled-up air mattress from a box. "Where's the pump?" "It's built in. I'll have you know, I spared no expense on that really nice air mattress," she declared, coming to stand beside him. Grinning, he glanced down at her, shaking his head like he was trying to figure her out. "Did you sleep on one of these in Denver?" "No." At his question, her face closed up. and she said with a tight voice, "I'll put my bathroom things away." Zack grasped the sleeve of her sweater. "What did I say wrong?" He faced her, dropping the air mattress and taking her hand. "I feel like I'm walking on glass sometimes. I'm not meaning to pry, but I need to understand what happened to you, so I don't touch on sensitive subjects." Holly had known this moment would come, but it still made her sick to her stomach. Then a reprieve came via a knock at the door. Zack let out a frustrated huff. "That'll be the pizza." He touched her cheek and met her gaze. "But I still want to know who hurt you." Without another word, he dropped his hand and strode from the room. Holly's eyes stung, and a lump formed in her throat, making it hard to swallow. Zack had shown more concern for her than her parents had, more than her twin sister, or the man Holly had been getting ready to marry last December. She wiped her eyes, put on her big girl panties, and headed into what was sure to be an evening of topics she had avoided for nearly a year. "I'm glad you came to Canyondale," Zack said with a forced nonchalance as he opened the pizza box on the kitchen counter. "I've always wanted to ask for a while if you remembered I was from here, but I realize now it was wishful thinking on my part." Holly had been so worried he would ask for something from her that she'd failed to recognize his insecurity. So much for thinking she was empathic. "No, I didn't remember you were from Utah at all." She selected a slice of pizza with Canadian bacon on it. "I got consumed with college and work and falling in love." Holly took a bite of her pizza. "Is he the one who hurt you?" Zack asked softly. Holly swallowed, but the food settled in her stomach like a lead weight. She'd spent so much time in the past year avoiding talking about Brett. Maybe it was time to just vent. "Yes, I caught him and my twin sister in a passionate kiss at my rehearsal dinner." Zack went still for a moment before setting down his pizza, his face flushing, eyes ablaze. Holly had only seen him angry once in the 2 summers they had worked together, and he'd been fearsome to behold. This mature Zack was even more so. That he was feeling this on her behalf was incredibly gratifying. She touched his hand. "Thank you for that." "I didn't say anything." He shot her a confused glance. "But I confess, I'd like to punch someone." "I appreciate that. It's more than I got from my family. Now, eat your dinner." Holly picked up her pizza again. "I have to know one thing," Zack asked. "All right." "Your parents supported the 2 cheaters." His words were a statement. "Yes." Holly was proud of herself for the lack of hurt in her voice. Maybe time really did heal all wounds. Zack nodded. "Well, this explains a lot." As they ate in silence, Holly wondered if it explained enough. Would she need to tell him more to find the peace she sought? It had actually felt good sharing with him about it, especially since Zack had seemed to understand. Was the little she'd told him enough for her to stop running and finally heal? "Hey, I've been meaning to talk to you about something," he finally said when they were cleaning up after the meal. "Something else?" she asked warily. "Nothing heavy or personal," he assured her. "You must have heard people talking about the Winter Festival. Has Kathy mentioned needing your help?" "She did, and I'm excited to get involved, finally." Holly hadn't expected to look forward to anything related to the holiday, but volunteering to help the community heal appealed to her. "Maybe it will help me want to celebrate the season." Zack scanned her empty living room. "I don't have any Christmas decorations either. We should go shopping together." Memories from last year came rushing back. Holly's throat tightened, making it impossible to speak, If Brett hadn't been a lying cheater, they would have been preparing to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. But she was done letting him steal the pleasure from her life. So she nodded. I would like that. Chapter 3. When Holly woke the next morning to the bright light, a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in far too long filled her. Months ago, when she promised Zack to give Canyondale a chance, she had struggled with doubt. Nothing in her experience prepared her for the warm welcome she had received. At the time, Holly hadn't met very many people in town and had no idea about the problems simmering beneath the surface. But the shooting had shocked everyone, softening the stances between newcomers and old-timers. Regardless of the promise Holly had made, she knew she would have left if the town hadn't come together. Though it was still early morning, and there was a chill in the air, it sounded like someone was moving in next door. Her building had a mix of one-bedroom units like hers, alongside studio apartments. The adjacent buildings, circling a grassy central gathering area, included 2-bedroom apartments and 3-bedroom townhomes. The complex's clubhouse had already been decorated with a tree and lights, along with items for both Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. It seemed their drive for inclusiveness extended to everything. With a communal space that included amenities, like strategically placed pavilions with built-in barbecues, a children's play area, and a fire pit with benches around it, Holly thought this should be a fun place to live. "Careful there, Zack," a male voice called. "Let me help with that." Holly leaped from her bed and dashed to her entry window to peek outside. Zack had his truck backed into a stall in front of the apartment next door. Was he helping someone else to move? Since she wanted to give back to these people who had been so welcoming to her, she figured she'd better get dressed and offer to help. After taking a quick shower, pulling her long hair into a ponytail, and grabbing a heavy sweater, Holly stepped out into the bright sunlight. It was colder than it looked, and she wondered if she should have grabbed her coat instead. "Hey, Holly." Zack stepped out of the adjacent door and gave her a hug. His embrace warmed her, and, like it had last night, her body had a mind of its own and snuggled closer. He smelled so good, and she actually sniffed his neck. Embarrassed, her face turned hot. She stepped back, unwilling to look at him. Instead, she met the gazes of 2 tall men, one black with a shaved head and the other fair with a blonde military cut. They exchanged knowing glances, both trying to bite back smiles. Holly decided she didn't even want to know what they were thinking. "You must be Ike and Mark. I've seen your helicopter," she said, extending her hand, and they each shook it. "Yes, ma'am," Ike, the black man, said. "Kathy talks about you all the time and says she got you to promise to help set up for the festival." His phone pinged. "We have to bounce. We're on tween duty." "See you, Zack." Mark glanced at Holly and then back at Zack. "Let us know if you need any more help." "I got this." Jack scowled at his friend, his cheeks flushed. "What's tween duty?" Holly asked when the 2 men had driven away. "Hasn't Kathy mentioned how Mackenzie and her brother Ike are raising their half-brothers?" "Oh, yeah, tweens. Duh." Holly pointed to the open door behind him. "Are you helping someone else move in here?" Zack's ears turned red. "I'm moving in here." Why hadn't he said anything yesterday? Holly took a step back, suspicious. For nearly a year she had questioned why Brett had said nothing about his doubts about marrying her or his growing feelings for Ivy. He had proposed to Holly, after all, not the other way around. "Why didn't you say so last night?" she asked, moving closer to her door. "You were having so much fun finally moving into your own place that I didn't want to take away from it." His expression turned vulnerable. "And I was worried you might not want me as a neighbor. Me getting this particular unit was totally random." Holly's heart ached at the thought that her insecurities might have hurt Zack. He'd done nothing to make her doubt his sincerity, even during those 2 summers they'd spent as youth camp counselors. The corner of her mouth quirked up. "I can't think of anyone who would be a better neighbor. Can I help with anything?" "I have more stuff than you," he warned. "Could you organize my kitchen?" Holly blinked and then narrowed her eyes. "Why? Because I'm a girl?" "Don't hit me." Zack held his arms in front of his face. "What?" Holly sputtered, indignant he would think such a thing. Then he lowered his hands, the corners of his mouth twitching, though the tone of his voice was serious. "I know you wouldn't, but you ought to know. I'm not a sexist either." Zack tilted his head, brows arched and his eyes twinkling. "Kathy says you know your way around a kitchen. And it's not a skill I've needed since my mom is always giving me leftovers. Look, my friends even had to help me put together a 7-layer dip for the 4th of July barbecue. I really am incompetent." "Sorry." Holly couldn't believe how she'd overreacted. Nothing Zack had said or done was anything like the misogynistic doctor in Denver and his rants about a woman's place. "Isn't your apartment a studio? Do you mind showing it to me?" Zack turned toward his door, keeping his expression neutral despite the sudden rush of exhilaration. He needed to play this subtly or give away too much of how he felt about her. As hard as the last 4 months had been, it had given him time to think of ways to woo her. His biggest worry had been that she wouldn't want him to. Then Holly had totally sniffed him a few minutes ago. Her spontaneous reaction alone was an enormous step in the right direction. And she liked how he smelled. "The kitchen's here." Zack pointed to the left. "I've already put the freezer stuff away." Wow, for a studio apartment, this place has a decent amount of counter space. Holly went down the short hallway and turned the corner into the bedroom area. The design is kind of brilliant, the way they've used the wall of closets to separate the sleeping space from the rest. Put in a door and they could call this a 1-bedroom apartment and charge more. Dang. She grumbled with a huff. "What's wrong?" Zack asked, fighting back worry that he'd done something wrong. "I never even looked at the studio apartments here. In Denver, I leased one for a year. It had the worst layout ever. I could have gotten one of these and saved some money." "But then we wouldn't be next-door neighbors." Looking at his pleased expression, Holly appeared to fight back a grin. "That's true." So Zack took a mental breath and braved more. "Doesn't it feel like serendipity that you ended up here in Canyondale, of all places?" "Right?" Holly did smile then, her cheeks pinking a little, the flush showing off the sprinkling of freckles on her nose. "Maybe it was meant to be. I'll get to work in the kitchen." Grinning, Zack got busy organizing his small living room. He should have the guys coming in later to set up the wall mount for his television. After a few minutes, Holly poked her head over the counter dividing the kitchen from the dining/living room space. "That didn't take long. Your kitchen is in order. What there is of it, anyway. If you plan to do any cooking, you need to make a grocery store run." "I told you it wouldn't be hard." When she stepped into the living room, she cried. "Oh, what's this?" and immediately headed to the drop-leaf table Zack had retrieved from his mother's attic last night. "That's the table I made my junior year of high school." "I remember you talking about it." Holly lifted first one rounded leaf and then the other. "Didn't you win a prize in the state fair with it?" "I did." Zack's heart thrilled that, even after all these years, She hadn't forgotten how much it meant to him to win. "Where will you put it?" She scanned the room. "You already have a small dining table, and this would get in the way in your entry." "I brought it for you." Holly straightened and turned to stare at him. Something flashed in those blue eyes again that made him ache for her. "My older sister had it in her house until they outgrew it," Zack quickly explained. "It sat in my mom's attic for a couple of years, and I figured you could get some use out of it, unless you don't like it and want to buy something else." "No, I love it." Holly shifted her gaze to the table again. "With the ends raised, I could seat a good half-dozen people around it." "Yeah, or leave one down for just you or another person." An image of the two of them sharing an intimate dinner came to mind, making his stomach tighten. Once again, she surprised him with a twitch at the corner of her mouth, but she didn't disagree and only said, "Thank you." "I'm glad it will get some use. My mom made me bring one other thing for you." Holly laughed. "I wondered why you needed 2 bed sets." She nodded to both headboards leaning against the wall. "I mentioned you'd been sleeping on only an air mattress, and she insisted I take a bed from the attic. No mattress, though. Those got trashed years ago. Their house is one of the oldest in the area, and they've accumulated quite a collection of furniture over the generations. She was glad to get rid of something. But you'll need a couch, too. Kathy has talked about coming over here for movie nights." "We've already had long-distance movie nights where we watched the same thing and chatted with each other online. I think she misses Mackenzie since she and Mark got engaged." "You're right. I'm glad you and Kathy have hit it off so well. It's good for her." "What about you? Do you still prefer the air rescue?" Holly's face remained placid, but curiosity laced her tone. "Definitely. It's kind of crazy. Just before I got shot that night, Mark had asked me if I would be interested in working part-time for them as the EMT for an airmed helicopter business. You know, they started out doing sightseeing flights, but they've slowly pulled out of that and will eventually just do rescue." Zack hesitated, but decided to mention his 15 minutes of fame. "It all started when the guys got asked to fly me and Kathy to rescue a couple of climbers last summer before you moved here. It even got videotaped and went viral." "What's this? A rescue video?" Holly asked, pulling out her phone. "I've got to see this." Zack's cheeks grew hot, but he flipped through his phone until he found the video and handed it to her to watch. "Oh, my," Holly breathed. "Is that Kathy?" "Yeah, she's fearless." "Excuse me, but I think you're pretty fearless, too." Holly handed the phone back with a soft laugh. "My hands are shaking from watching that." Her expression turned serious. "You could have been killed." "Yeah." Zack rubbed the back of his neck. "But it's dangerous being a deputy, too." She shot him a dark look. "Have you forgotten I helped treat you that night?" Holly sighed. "But I get it. We're lucky to have people like you willing to do it." Holly's phone pinged with a text. She checked it and gave a resigned sigh. "It's from Kathy. She says we'd best get busy because she and Mackenzie need our help. Yesterday, she mentioned something about a bake sale. How did she know we'd be together?" "Mark or Ike probably mentioned it. I hope you don't mind helping with the festival." Zack was counting on them working together on some of the preparations. "No," she said, tearing up. "I'm a firm believer in healing, especially after the shooting." But even as she spoke the words, a shuttered look came to her eyes, and Zack feared it had to do with the pain she still held inside. Without thinking about it, he gave Holly a quick hug. It was obvious the people of Canyondale weren't the only ones who needed healing. He ached for her obvious pain, but dang, she felt good in his arms. Chapter 4. "Holly," Kathy called from the ER nurse's station. Holly had almost finished reviewing the paperwork about a motorcycle accident that had happened while she was busy moving. The interruption would have irritated her, but the tone in the woman's sing-songy voice made Holly rise from the desk instead. "Someone has a delivery for you." Kathy nodded at the young man standing at the counter. Holly had never seen him before. He wore a heavy coat since the weather had turned unusually cold again, but his expression was also nervous. "Is something wrong?" she asked, hurrying to join them. "Nothing." He handed her a package. "Well, open it," Kathy said when Holly turned it over, searching for information about the sender. But Holly'd had a stalker once in Denver, some guy who'd come in for stitches and fixated on her. When she had rebuffed his advances, things turned ugly. She knew that not all packages were gifts. Just one more thing she didn't mind leaving behind in Colorado. Please don't let it be happening again. "Who's it from?" she asked, looking up, but the delivery guy was already heading outside. "Hey, wait!" Holly put the package on the counter and jogged after him. When she called his name again, he broke into a run. "Wait!" With his longer legs, he quickly outpaced her. Feeling foolish and cold since she was only wearing her scrubs, Holly stopped. "Everything all right?" Dr. Miller asked, approaching her. "It's probably nothing." She tried to keep the words casual, but some of her worry must have crept in, because the older man frowned. Holly said, "Someone delivered a package at the hospital for me, but when I went to find out who, the guy ran away." "Oh, my dear girl." Dr. Miller gave her a fatherly smile. "Christmas is coming, and people like their secrets. You'll find many of the patients who are grateful for our services will send little presents to us this time of year. Go back inside. You're shivering." He waved her ahead of him. "What was that about?" Kathy asked when Holly entered. She explained about the stalker in Colorado. "We don't have people like that here." "You didn't have anyone shoot people in a city council meeting either, until you did." Holly wished back her words at Kathy's expression. "Sorry." "No, you're right. We don't live in Happy Valley anymore. But I have to hope that was an anomaly. People really are trying." Kathy pointed to the package. "To be honest, this looks like one of those packages of candy or maybe hot chocolate." Holly picked up the parcel to examine it again. "The wrapping looks professional. We don't have any big department stores here who normally offer gift wrapping." "There's a church group doing a fundraiser," Dr. Miller said, joining them at the desk. "I've seen this paper before, so it looks like they did it. Aren't you going to open it?" "Do you think they would tell me who sent it?" Holly asked. The doctor shot her a flat look while Kathy covered her mouth to hide a smile. "Fine. I know I'm ridiculously suspicious." With a sigh, she tore open the paper to expose one of the really nice tins of gourmet hot chocolate. "I told you," Kathy said, "and it's even hazelnut, your favorite." "Did this come with it?" Dr. Miller asked, holding up an envelope. "Yes." Kathy arched her brows. "Open it. It might say who sent it." Holly turned it over, charmed against her will that it had a wax seal with a Christmas candle imprinted on it. "Hand me the letter opener." "Oh, I love this kind of thing. It's so fun," Kathy cried, handing it over. "This is definitely the church group," Dr. Miller said, leaning closer. "One of the ladies is into calligraphy." "Would she tell me who bought this?" Holly asked as she slowly slid the thin metal under the seal to keep it from cracking. "No, but you can rest assured they wouldn't do it for someone they didn't trust." He turned toward his office. "Let me know when we have work to do." "This is our break," Kathy called after him. He merely waved his hand, but didn't look back. Holly gave a contented smile. She was growing to love working with these people more every day. None of the doctors in Denver had been this good to work with. "Well," Kathy urged, "what does it say?" Holly slid out the handmade card depicting a snowy winter scene with the Christmas star shining over a decorated Christmas tree. She flipped it open and found a sweet message. "Christmas is not as much about opening our presents as opening our hearts. Janus Meditere. From your secret Santa." "I told you," Kathy declared, leaning back. Holly ran her fingers over the beautiful script. "But who would do this?" "How many people have you helped to treat over the past 4 months?" Kathy pointed to the Christmas tree in the entry, where grateful patients had dropped packages off for the hospital staff. They always sorted out the obvious goodies to eat right away, but would open the gifts closer to Christmas and donate them to a local charity. But none of them claimed to be a secret Santa for anyone. Kathy's grin turned sly. "I'm thinking you have a secret admirer." Holly immediately thought of Zack, but that was stupid. They were only friends, right? Then she remembered how good he'd smelled. Her cheeks went hot at the memory. He would have said something then if he'd noticed. Could the attraction she felt for him be one-sided? And did it matter if she wasn't ready for more? She closed the card and carefully returned it to the envelope. What did this secret Santa want from her? Zack grinned when he heard Holly's door open. He'd been waiting for the sound so he could, oh so conveniently, step outside at the same time she was leaving. "Hey, Holly," he said as he turned to lock his door. "How was work today?" "It wasn't too bad. We were busy enough to not get bored, but nothing too horrible. You?" "I worked traffic today. People who speed in school zones should have their licenses revoked." Zack shook his head in disgust. "I was happy to ticket a guy who was not only driving too fast, but on his phone, too. He barely missed a kid." Even one extra mile can make a difference when a car hits a child. Holly shuddered and pulled her scarf higher up on her neck. "Where are you headed?" "I'm helping with the festival tonight, aren't you?" "Yes, as if you don't know that, since Kathy said you're helping set up the vendor booths." She shivered. "Do you think this cold weather will keep people away?" "I don't think so. Not with everyone in town so invested in it." Zack pointed to his truck. "Would you like to ride together?" "Sure." He hurried to open the truck door for her when he gave her a hand up. He wished they didn't have gloves on. "Thank you," she whispered. Something in the way she said it gave him even more hope. How did he play on their attraction without making it only about the physical? Because he wanted much more than that from Holly, and he didn't want her to get distracted by thoughts of her ex and her sister. Once they were on the road, with Christmas music playing, Zack wondered what to talk about, but Holly beat him to it. "Have you ever had a secret Santa?" When she said the words, they took a moment to register. He could only pray it was dark enough inside the cab she couldn't see his red face, because it was flaming and his heart raced. Had Holly already caught him? The lady he'd bought the card from assured him she wouldn't give him away. "Sure. When I was in college and lived in the dorm, they did it as a kind of gift exchange. They asked us not to spend a lot of money because starving students." Since his voice mostly sounded almost normal, he added, "Why? You thinking of doing one at the ER?" There. That came out sounding natural. "No, but maybe I should mention it to Kathy. Though she's so involved with the festival, she probably doesn't need to add any more to her plate." Holly glanced at him. Where are we going, by the way? The community center. Zack wanted to ask her more about the Secret Santa, but then it might be obvious he was the sender. It's the main staging area. The guys and I will work on some booths and games, while I understand you'll be helping with the food. He could see her watching him from the corner of his eye, so he shot her a sly, sidelong glance. Holly laughed, her cheeks flushing. Some of the local restaurants are sending people to help with the kitchen food, too. Zack frowned. I remember you had to work during the Watermelon Festival last September and missed it. I was so tired that I just had to get home and crash. But I'm looking forward to helping with it next year. Zack liked how she was planning to be here that long. Well, Canyondale knows how to throw a party. We assumed you would help with the cooking, but would you rather work on the construction projects? I know my way around a toolbox, but it's not my strong point, that's for sure. Holly leaned her head against the seat back. I'm actually looking forward to working with Mackenzie, since I've tasted some of her Unity sweets. She has a wonderful gift. Yes, she does. Kathy is just a happy helper. Zack grinned. She's always said she can be a good sidekick, that she can follow a recipe and get a decent result, but she's not creative like Mackenzie. That's an excellent description of me, too. So I'm glad someone like her is in charge and will tell me what to do. Zack pulled into a parking spot at the bustling community center, glad to see so many formerly divided community members working together for a common goal. He jumped out, hurried around to open Holly's door, and extended a hand to help her down. This is exciting. He felt like he was going to burst with pride. He recalled too well the night of the shooting, when the animosity amongst residents and members of the city council had been almost palpable. Zack had even asked Mark if he thought the town could ever heal from it. It was just a shame people had died to make it happen. It's contagious, isn't it? Holly scanned the people getting out of their cars before meeting Zack's gaze. I'm going to be honest with you. I hope you'll always feel comfortable talking to me. It's hard. I think I've bottled everything up too long, and it's hurting me. Not them. It was an important realization, but Zack didn't say it aloud. He didn't want her to think he was judging her. Your ex and your sister? He asked, keeping his voice soft. And my parents, too. Holly dropped her gaze. It all came down on December 23rd. The wedding was supposed to have been on Christmas Eve. Ow. Going through hard times is always made worse when it falls on a holiday. That's why I've been dreading this year. Until now. Just let me know if I can help with anything. Zack meant every word and made sure his feelings came through in his voice. Holly met his gaze again, those beautiful eyes shining in the glow of the streetlight. Like a moth to a flame, her full lips drew his attention. He knew they would be soft because she was always putting on scented lip balm. What would she taste like? Great, you guys are already here, Mark called. Zack startled back and Holly looked down, her cheeks turning red. Mark pulled up in their large SUV. Oh, no, Zack muttered. They've brought the boys with them. Is that a problem? Holly asked, her voice a little tremulous. They're just full of energy and very creative. Zack took her hand and they hurried toward the building. He had almost kissed her. Would it have been a mistake? Part of him said it was too soon, but another part wanted to risk it. Chapter 5. Holly was so glad for the time freed up in not commuting between Price and Canyondale. She laughed, still amazed at how fun this December had turned out so far. Even 6 months ago, she would never have dreamed she could be so happy. The last 2 weeks had been full of long shifts at the hospital, shopping trips with Zack to furnish her apartment, and even decorating it for Christmas with a small tree. That alone had been a huge step for her. Then there were the hours they spent baking and building and planning. Everywhere she went, people called her by name and asked after her. Kathy hadn't been kidding when she mentioned people dropping off presents at the hospital. Some came from businesses sending gift baskets, but most were personal things to the staff for the excellent care the people had received there. Nothing in Holly's experience in Denver had prepared her for this, and she loved it. And then there was her secret Santa. Every single day she had received something. It was obviously someone who knew her well enough that gifts either landed on her doorstep, came in the mail, or were delivered at the hospital on days she was working. Some of the things she had received included treats, cozy mittens, bath salts, a personalized Christmas tree ornament, a large mug, and the next day a box of herbal teas. She'd even gotten mismatched socks that would have made Harry Potter's Dobby proud. And each came with an inspirational quote or short story. They all lifted her mood, and she found she looked forward to receiving them every day. Often she figured it must be Zack, but other times Kathy. But it could be one of them helping the real Secret Santa. Along with an angel tree for people to draw names to give gifts to struggling people, another activity had been drawing names to play Secret Santa for. Holly wished she had known about that one sooner, because she would have liked to take part. She definitely would next year. "You have another gift, huh?" Dr. Miller asked, coming to stand by the nurse's station. "What is it today?" "I really wish I knew who was doing this, so I could reciprocate." Holly tore off the wrapping paper to find a pocket-sized book. "That's not exactly the point of a Secret Santa." The doctor peered at the small book. "Is it a journal?" "No." She flipped through the pages. "It's full of short quotes encouraging reflection and new beginnings." "You look troubled." "I feel like someone's trying to tell me something." Unsettled, Holly tossed the paper in the trash and slipped the little volume into her pocket. "Does it feel like a lecture?" Dr. Miller eyed her, one brow arched. Holly didn't know how to put her feelings into words. "Well, if I can offer you fatherly observation," he waited for her to nod before continuing. "You had a haunted look in your eyes when you first started here. It intensified after the shooting. To be frank, I was worried about you for a while, but it eventually faded. Now that you've moved to Canyondale, it has almost completely disappeared. Is it too much of me to presume that some of it has to do with these little gifts you've been receiving every day?" She grinned. "You are very observant, Doctor." "Thank you. It's something I've worked on. But I think a lot of your healing has come from the time you spend with Zack Jarvie. From what I've noticed, he's good for you, even more so than your Secret Santa." Dr. Miller tilted his head, studying her. "Are you and Zack just friends?" Once again, Holly wasn't sure how to answer. It kind of felt like they were dating, but at the same time, it was more like friends hanging out. But the longer she spent in Canyondale, the more she wanted it to be dating. At least, she thought she did. "Well, Zack is a good man. I've known him all his life. In fact, I delivered him." Dr. Miller gave a soft chuckle, his gaze off in the distance like he was remembering. "He's the middle child, you know, in a large family. The first boy, though. We were all having a Memorial Day barbecue when his mother's water broke, and he came in a hurry. She didn't even make it to the car." "Oh, wow!" Holly laughed, having met the orderly woman a few times. "I'll bet it totally messed up her schedule." "Yes, it did." Before the doctor could say more, the door burst open and a group carrying a man with an injured leg hurried inside. Later, when Holly could finally take a break, she reached into her pocket and remembered the book. She opened it and scanned the pages, full of little quotes about learning new things, different ways to be yourself, and the magic of starting over. They were all true, and she felt them in her heart. When Brett and her loved ones had turned their backs on her, it opened her eyes to the truth. Everything she had believed about her life was a lie. The loving family had crumbled when they stood together and accused Holly of being the problem. But everything was different now. In the ER, they often had to deal with difficult situations, and sometimes they lost people. Looking back on where she was when she left Denver, Holly realized those downtimes didn't overwhelm her anymore. It was because of the support of the people here in Canyondale who had welcomed and embraced her. Where her family had thrown her away, strangers had welcomed her. And Dr. Miller was right. Zack Jarvie was a huge part of how far she had come. Holly's phone pinged with a text from her brother. She hadn't heard from him since he texted her a Happy Thanksgiving greeting. Maybe he was getting a head start on Christmas. I know you don't want to, but we need to talk about the family. And with a simple sentence, her happy and upbeat mood washed away. As soon as Holly opened her apartment door, Zack could tell something was bothering her. A lot. What's wrong? He wanted to pull her into a hug, but worried she wouldn't think it was appropriate. Come on in. She moved back to make room for him. Zack stomped the snow off his boots and stepped inside, wishing for once that her unit was like his, with the kitchen nearby. He set the pizza box on the table and turned to find she had moved over to the couch she purchased on one of their shopping sprees. Tell me what happened, he said as he took the seat beside her. Holly woke her phone and shifted it so he could see a text message from someone named Jason. I know you don't want to, but we need to talk about the family. Zack had to push down a stab of jealousy, reminding himself this wasn't about him. Who's Jason? My brother. Relief flooded him. It made sense then if her brother wanted to discuss their family. Zack didn't need to get involved in the middle of their feud. He saw enough of those at work, and he knew how ugly they could get because relatives had the power to hurt each other more than anyone else. But Holly needed support in whatever she decided to do about this. I notice you haven't responded. She let the phone drop onto the couch cushion, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Hey. Zack extended an arm, but left it up to her if she wanted him to hug her. She slid into his embrace. As soon as Holly rested her head against his shoulder, the tears came. Zack said nothing, hoping if she cried it out, she might be able to speak about it. I'm sorry, she finally said, straightening. He grabbed a box of tissues from the end table and held it out to her. She took 3 and used them to wipe her eyes. Once she'd also blown her nose and tossed them into a small trash can. Holly must have decided she was ready. I was having such a good day, too. I got another present from my Secret Santa, and it was just the kind of thing I needed. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small book he had purchased. The quotes fit my mood perfectly, and Dr. Miller and I had a great chat. Holly's cheeks pinked, and she shot Zack an embarrassed glance. They must have been talking about him. Now I'm worried. He grinned, hoping to lift the mood. He said something about me, right? Did you know he delivered you at a barbecue? That old story. Zack leaned back. I swear every new person who moves into town ends up hearing it. He had a lot of good things to say about you. That was kind of him. No, it's the truth. Holly said the words so simply and with something indiscernible in her voice that he'd not heard before. Was she finally willing to look at him as something besides a friend? "Well, that's kind of you, then." She gave him a weak smile, but then glanced at the phone on the cushion near her leg and picked it up. "You mentioned talking to your brother before Thanksgiving," Zack said carefully. "Do you two speak much?" "Usually a few texts a month. We mostly just check in with each other to be sure we're okay. He's in his first year of law school, so he's pretty busy." Holly turned the phone over in her hands. "This is the first time he's mentioned them since the blow-up last year." "Do you think they would like to make amends?" Zack asked. "I don't know." Holly's tears started again, so he handed her the entire tissue box. "You're not alone in this," he said once she calmed enough. He thought she might listen to him. "If you would rather not talk to me about it, I get it. I'm sure Kathy would understand. Her parents are at war, and she can never be in the same room with both of them without there being a fight." "I don't want to burden you." "Stop right there." Zack held up a hand. "I'm here for you, too. Whatever you need, and not just as a friend." He hadn't meant to say it. Now she would think he wanted something from her, which he did, but only if she wanted it too. She watched him, and he could only hope that her not crying anymore was a good sign. She held up the small book. "Did you give this to me?" "Busted." He let out his breath and then nodded. Holly surprised him then by shifting onto her knees and moving so her face was close to his. Her flushed cheeks brought out those delightful freckles. The sudden blaze in her eyes made his heart pound. But was she going to yell at him, or she pressed her lips to his? Zack had wanted this for so long that he was instantly all in, wrapping his arms around her. Memories of their young kisses got pushed aside by this new one, full of mature emotions. Her warm lips were softer than he remembered from all those years ago, but she still tasted like cherry from her favorite lip gloss. Finally, tired of the awkward position, he broke the kiss and rose, pulling Holly to her feet. She wrapped her arms around his neck. He pulled her closer, loving the way she fit against him, like God had made them a matched set. When he brushed the flesh of her waist where her sweater had lifted, and her skin rippled under his fingers, Zack froze. This was all happening too fast. He had waited a long time for Holly to be ready for them, but she was vulnerable tonight. "What's wrong?" Holly asked, dropping her hands to his chest. "Nothing's wrong. I just think we need to slow down." He kissed the tip of her nose. "I don't want to take advantage. This is not coming out right." "Oh, Zack." She lifted on her tiptoes and gave him a quick peck before stepping back. "You're right." She flopped onto the couch again. He didn't know exactly what the tone in her voice meant, but he knew what he wanted, and he needed her to understand what it was. If the kiss had been a rebound because of the talk about her estranged family, then he wanted to know that now. So he sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. Holly didn't hesitate to lean into him. Zack sent a silent prayer of gratitude heavenward. They sat together in silence until his stomach rumbled. "Oh, you poor thing," she cried, jumping to her feet and turning to pull him to his. "You brought that pizza, and we've let it get cold." Zack needed to make sure Holly understood he wanted a romantic relationship with her. He stood next to her as they pulled out the dishes and later moved his chair so he was sitting close to her rather than opposite her at the table. Then he shifted his foot to rest against hers, so they remained in touch. When he did that, her cheeks flushed, but a smile teased the corner of her mouth, something he had better not focus on too much. He had been patient since finding her again last August. He could be patient a little longer. Chapter 6. As Holly ate a slice of pizza, her mind kept going back to the kiss. Kisses, actually. Good grief. But she would never have dreamed of throwing herself at a man like that. There were plenty of guys who would have taken advantage of her vulnerability. Her heart swelled with gratitude that Zack wasn't among them. He was strong in the right ways and brave. Her gaze drifted to her phone, and she wondered why Jason wanted to talk about them. In the past, any time he had brought up their family, she shut him down. He knew she had no wish to speak about that time. Just thinking about them made her eyes burn again. The people she had always thought would support her through anything had turned against her. No. Holly rubbed against the lump in her throat. She didn't want to cry anymore.
"Have you had enough?"
Zack asked. "Yeah, eat the rest." She liked how he had placed his foot by hers, barely touching, but enough that she knew he was there. It reminded her of his subtle encouragement and support at camp during those 2 summers. He was still that awesome person, but even better now.
"I could, but it's not good to eat this much later in the day."
He leaned back in his chair and nodded at her phone.
"What will you do about your brother?"
Can I just ignore it?
"He's the last member of your family you still have contact with. Do you usually dismiss him for hours?"
Holly appreciated that there were no accusations in Zack's words. It really did just sound like a simple question. She sighed. No, I'm sure he's worried he hasn't heard from me yet.
"Do you want to see what he has to say?"
I don't, she said, meaning it. But I'll bet he's stuck between us, which is totally unfair to him. Zack only arched his brows expectantly. Fine, I'll text him. With cold hands, she woke her phone. Is now an okay time to talk? It rang almost immediately. As panic filled her, she stared at Zack. Maybe she wasn't ready for this.
"I have your back,"
he whispered, resting a hand on her knee. Holly accepted the call and put it on speaker. Jason?
"Halls, it's so good to hear your voice."
With her emotions already so high, the sound of her beloved brother's voice almost did her in. Zack must have sensed it because he moved his hand to the table and laced their fingers. How are you? She asked, though her voice came out raspy.
"Finally done with the semester. I'm headed to Florida with some friends for the Christmas break."
That sounds like fun. Holly was glad she sounded more normal. It will be nice for you to spend time in warmer weather. It's been crazy here. The weather can't make up its mind whether to be warmer than normal or unusually cold.
"Well, I guess I should get right to it."
She pinched her eyes closed, shaking her head as her stomach tightened, and she worried she might lose her dinner. Then Zack's grip tightened just a little, reminding her he was there. Why are they making you be the middleman? She asked.
"Would you take a call from any of them?"
He sounded surprised. To be honest, no. And if I found out you had given my number to them...
"You would have blocked me too," Jason interrupted.
Yes.
"Which I would never do, I promise. But I discovered this afternoon that last week, while I was in the restroom, Ivy got into my phone and found your information."
Holly stiffened, her body flushing with anger at her sister's presumption. I'm not surprised she would betray your trust, too.
"A lot has happened here lately." I don't care. Holly broke in before he could say more. They've shown their true colors, and I refuse to keep toxic people around me. Even if they're trying to change their ways? Jason asked, his voice pleading. And what makes you think they're doing that? Some of this, I think, would be better if you heard it from them directly. No. I closed that door a long time ago, and for my well-being, I need to keep it shut. It pained her to say the words, but deep in her heart, Holly knew they were completely true. It terrified her to give them the power to hurt her again. Her self-esteem had taken an enormous hit the day her parents had stood in defense of her cheating sister. I don't know that you have a choice. I'll tell them, but I have to warn you. They're pretty determined. What do you mean? She asked, shocked at what he might be suggesting. Are you saying they could come here even after I made it clear I wouldn't see them? I'm saying exactly that. When they told me their plans, nothing I said made any difference. Look, I'm leaving in the morning for Florida, but I wanted to warn you that you could have some visitors. I can only hope common sense will prevail, since there's a forecast for a severe storm. I'm really sorry, and please know that I love you, Halls. I love you too, Jason, and thank you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Her brother disconnected the call. Do you think they'll really come? Zack asked. My sister was too cowardly to tell me she had feelings for my fiancé. I don't know what's happened back there, but the thought of seeing Brett again makes me ill. Zack let out a heavy sigh. I sure hope I don't end up spending Christmas in jail. Holly laughed at his comment, but Zack meant it. He wasn't sure if her ex showed his face in town that Zack wouldn't punch it. Thank you for lightening the mood. She brought their clasped hands to her cheek. Your support means so much to me. I will always be here for you. Zack said the words simply and didn't care about showing his powerful feelings. She rewarded him with a pepperoni kiss. He could just eat her up. Fortunately, his phone pinged with a text. It was from Mackenzie. Have you asked her yet? Zack pulled a face. What's wrong? Holly asked. The donor dinner is tomorrow night. Yes, it is. Her expression turned flirty. And I know for a fact that you don't have a date. I've been wondering why you haven't asked anyone, especially since you're a guest of honor. I didn't invite anyone else because I wanted to take you. Zack brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. But I didn't want to take you as a +1. I want to take you as my girlfriend. Something delicious and encouraging flashed across her face. Is that what I am? Well, I've wanted it for a long time, but I didn't want to pressure you. The fire in her eyes dimmed a little, but not completely. I'll admit I've been conflicted about getting involved. Zack wanted to say she hadn't seemed conflicted when they were kissing, but he didn't know how she might take it, so he kept his mouth shut. If he had learned nothing else from having 3 older sisters, it was the importance of men biting their tongues when they were unsure. We can move as slow as you want. He winced. Assuming you would like to give us a try. Holly tilted her head. It scares me a little, but I can't think of anyone I want to take a risk with more than you. Her words sent an incredible rush of satisfaction through Zack, and he had to kiss her again, but he kept it short. I need to warn you, it's a dressy affair. Not formal like the Christmas ball will be, but fancier than anything I saw in your wardrobe when we helped you move in. Zack glanced out the window. And the weather is looking like it could get pretty ugly. Kathy offered to lend me one of her dresses if I got asked. Holly arched a brow. Have you been talking to her about me? His face went hot, but he didn't want honesty to ever be an issue between them. So he shrugged and said simply, the fearsome threesome. Ever since we got old enough to date, we've always had to give our approval. They approve of you. Holly rubbed her throat like she had earlier when she was getting emotional. I hope you realize how much you've come to mean to the people of this town. Zack brought their clasped hands to his mouth, and he kissed her knuckles. From the first moment I met you at camp, I knew you were special. I wish I'd realized then that we could lose touch with each other. I'd have made a greater effort to keep in contact. Me too. So, will you come with me? Zack decided to play it safe. As my tentative girlfriend? Holly blinked, a myriad of emotions flooding her face, a mixture of fear and bliss. Yes. Then I think you had better call Kathy about the dress. I believe I should. But she kissed him instead of picking up her phone. As Holly went to bed after Zack returned to his own place, she couldn't believe the emotional roller coaster the day had been. And Zack was her secret Santa. It made her so happy and added meaning to the thoughtfulness of his presence. Once he'd left, she went into her bedroom and spread all the gifts on the dresser. Seeing the items in this new light, Holly should have known it was Zack, but she kind of liked the way things had played out. It had been like everything finally reached a head, and she knew she was ready to take this step. To love someone. Was she in love? Based on the fear that made her throat choke, maybe not. It reminded her of when she'd gotten physical therapy for an impingement on her shoulder. While helping a patient, she had pulled her arm in an awkward position in Denver. Because of her busy schedule, it took a few months before she finally saw her doctor about it, and he referred her to physical therapy. After she'd been through several sessions, when she would experience pain moving a certain way even though she had just moved that way without hurting, he explained it was her fear. It made her expect it would hurt, so it did. Was that what she was doing with these new feelings for Zack? She hated the idea that the mistreatment by her family might cause her to hurt him. He was simply the finest man she had ever known, and he deserved the very best. But was she it? Chapter 7. Holly gave herself one more glance in the mirror. It had been a year since she had gotten this dressed up. Ugh, not that she wanted to think about that time. She was so done carrying the burden of what her sister and family had done to her. She grabbed her phone to check if she had missed any messages from Kathy or Zack while getting ready. The only one came from an unknown number. What if it was from her family? What if it was from someone at the hospital? Holly didn't have the phone numbers of everyone who worked there. With trepidation, she opened the message. We know we messed up, but hope you will let us talk to you. Expect to be there in a couple of hours. Love, Dad. Of course. It was just like them to assume she would, first, be here. What if she was still commuting to Price? But second, they expected her to drop everything to accommodate them. Their presumption was so typical. The anger festering inside over the years since that disastrous night flooded through Holly, making her head hurt, and her heart. 12 months ago, she had thought herself part of a loving and supportive family. Why did they have to intrude in her life now, just when she was finally feeling normal? Cared for, wanted, and this time for real. Not the lie they had lived. Frustrated, Holly woke her phone and read the message again. All of them. Her stomach turned sour. Did that mean they were bringing Brett with them? She covered her mouth, afraid she might throw up. No, she had all she could take from them and wouldn't let them spoil this evening, Zack's special night. Holly paced her apartment, stopping occasionally to look out the window. The snow was coming down hard now. Would they have to cancel the evening's events? Canyondale was on a mostly flat plateau above the river, but some of the outlying areas were at higher elevations. If it was this heavy here, how bad would it be for those people? They rarely got much snow, so Canyondale didn't have a need for a lot of snow removal equipment. One blessing was that a state highway ran through the town, so the state plowed it. But if this was a widespread storm, there might be too many roads for the existing equipment to handle. And they had to plow the road to Price, too. Once again, Holly was so glad she wasn't making that commute anymore. At the sound of Zack's apartment door opening, she dashed to her own. He'd barely tapped when she jerked it open and pulled him inside. With the door closed behind her, he leaned forward to give her a cold kiss. "Your lips are nice and warm." He grinned, pulling her closer. "It doesn't bode well if yours can freeze just walking from your place to mine." She wrapped her arms around his waist. "But you can fix that." Zack moved in, his brows raised, but waited for a sign from her before kissing her again. So Holly lifted on her tiptoes, and he pressed his mouth to hers. In the loveliness of his embrace and the way his touch brought her alive, she let herself forget about unwanted visitors. His eyes hooded and his breathing quick. Zack finally pulled away. He settled his forehead on hers. "I've used up all your lip gloss. Sorry, not sorry." "At least it's not lipstick." Holly would have liked to keep kissing, but if they didn't hurry, they would be late. He straightened, lifted her coat from the hook by the door, and held the garment for her to slide into. "I see you have snow boots on." "And my dress shoes are in a bag." She pointed to the door. "I've lived in snow country a long time." Holly frowned. She didn't want to think of that. Or them. "Do you think it'll be safe to go out tonight?" "Let's hope so. Everyone's put in so much work to make this happen. I'd hate for us to lose it because of a freak snowstorm." Zack straightened her coat and fastened the top button before kissing her again. "We'd better leave before I change my mind." Holly gave a soft laugh. "You definitely wouldn't want to explain why you didn't attend." Once they were in the truck and driving to the community center, with Christmas music playing softly, Zack asked, "Have you heard any more from your brother?" "Not from Jason, but I got a text from my dad. Can you believe it? They're on their way here. Tonight, and in this terrible storm. How stupid is that? And presumptuous." Holly went into the same rant she'd had with herself earlier, and Zack just let her vent. He made no judgments, nor offered any advice, just nodded quietly and let her get it all off her chest. It was so nice having a boyfriend who had older sisters to train him. Once Holly had finished, she sighed. Turning to look at him, she said, "Thank you for listening. It felt so good to say it. I refuse to think about them any more tonight." "Are you still feeling okay about this?" Zack moved his pointer finger from him to her and back to him again. Fear crept in. "You mean us?" Holly asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I can see you doubting again. Don't you even go there." Zack chided, shaking his head. "It ticks me off that people who were supposed to love you unconditionally have messed with your trust so badly. Yes, I'm talking about us. Because I'm falling in love with you, Holly." At her gasp, he winced, clearly regretting the sudden confession. But he pressed on, his words rushing out. "I'm not sorry I said it, just that I said it now. I'm probably going too fast, and the last thing I want to do is overwhelm you, put pressure on you, but it's out there now, and I won't take it back."
The earlier sense of being wanted swelled in Holly's heart, making her eyes sting and a knot grow in her throat so much she couldn't speak. She put a hand on his leg, blinking to keep the tears from falling. They would smear her makeup.
"I didn't ruin it?"
Zack finally asked, wishing he could take his hand from the wheel again to hold hers. But the road had gotten so slick he didn't dare. "No." Holly's voice came out rough, and she cleared her throat, saying it stronger. "No, you haven't ruined it. I think I'm falling in love with you, too." Dang, what a stupid time for them to be confessing their feelings while driving in a truck in the middle of a blizzard. Zack wanted to take her in his arms and tell her how he'd realized that all these years he had been waiting for her. Not that he'd understood it then, but these last few months, with her back in his life, he knew for sure. Instead, they sat in his stupid pickup, inching along an unplowed side street through several inches of snow. "I'm going to have to put on the chains," he said, slowly pulling his truck to the side of the road. He didn't want to go too close to the sidewalk for fear of getting stuck. "You have chains?"
"Eagle Scout here."
"Always prepared. Do you need me to help?"
"No, I've done this before."
Not often, but his father had made sure all his children knew how to change tires and put on chains. Zack left the truck running so it didn't get too cold inside. As he set out the chains, he couldn't believe how much snow had accumulated. It wouldn't last long because they'd had a warm spell a few days before the latest freeze. With the chains draped over the wheels, he fastened the connection. He hopped back into the truck and slowly drove forward about 50 feet before jumping out again to recheck the tension. Pleased that he had remembered correctly, he returned to the cab. "Will anyone even be there?" Holly asked when they were moving again.
"Some will, if worst comes to worst. As long as the power doesn't go out, we could stay there until the storm clears."
"A slumber party?" Holly asked, her mood lightening. "And if the caterer made it there, we'll have plenty of food."
"Too bad we didn't bring PJs,"
he said, getting into the silliness, since it distracted him from their precarious situation and made her give a nervous laugh. A few minutes later, Holly said, "Oh, there it is, and there are people there. Well done, Zack. I'm impressed."
"Thanks. Though I guess we'll see how long everyone stays."
He pulled into a parking space, grateful someone with a plow on the front of the truck had cleared snow from the spaces closest to the building. As fast as the snow continued to fall, they would need to do it again, though.
"Let me get your door."
Zack made his way around the truck, careful of the icy patches. "Yikes!" Holly cried, slipping and grabbing his arm, the bag with her dress shoes flopping against her. "I'm glad I wore my boots." He winced when a gust of wind blew her skirt around.
"Your legs must be freezing."
"Yay for heavy tights," she replied, a shiver in her voice. "It could be worse." Kathy and Mackenzie were waiting in the doorway and opened it for them.
"Are they going to cancel?"
Zack asked, stamping his boots. His slacks were soaking. It wouldn't be comfortable sitting in them through the dinner.
"Not so far," Mackenzie said, surprising them with 2 towels. "I think they want to do the honors and eat before sending everyone home."
"Store your boots and coats in there." Kathy pointed to a large walk-in coat closet. "Now that you guys have arrived, I think the mayor will want to start." Once they had hung up their coats and changed their shoes, Zack took her hand, embarrassed by how his shook.
I forgot to mention my parents called to say they're stuck in Price, so they can't make it. Please promise you'll stay by me. I hate this public recognition stuff, especially since all I did was get shot."
In a flash, Holly placed gentle fingers over his mouth. "Really? All you did was get shot?"
"We both know better. Mackenzie told me what happened that night, so don't you even go there," she said with disgust.
"And now we're going in there together. And you're going to accept recognition for being that guy, the one who has the guts to stand between the public and danger."
The intensity in her eyes, for him, made Zack's chest seem to swell enough to burst. He pulled Holly's hand away and kissed her.
"Oh, my heck, you two,"
Mackenzie said and laughed.
"Will you hurry?"
"Let's do this."
Zack took Holly's hand, and they strode together into the large room. Chapter 8. The room held more people than Holly had expected to face the storm, though there were a couple of empty tables. Still, she was glad they had assigned Zack and her seats at the same table as Kathy, Mackenzie, and company. After the mayor's welcome, the caterer's people brought in the food. Except for the occasional gusts of wind, it was easy to forget there was a raging blizzard outside. Mackenzie's stepbrother Ike, and especially Mark, shifted uneasily in their chairs. They often shared nervous glances with each other. At first, Holly thought it was because of the storm outside. However, when she opened the program, she noticed the two men would also be honored. The first tribute would be to the city council member who had been killed. If technology worked all right, his widow would accept the plaque through a video call, since she had moved with her two young children to another state. The mayor apologized for the lack of a musical program due to the storm, saying the entertainers would receive another opportunity to perform. As it came closer to the award ceremony, Zack squirmed in his seat. Fortunately for him, the mayor called all three men up at once, and the look on their faces when he ordered his staff to play the viral video recording of the helicopter rescue made her laugh. "Zack is waving for you to go up too, Kathy," Holly said, pointing to the stage. Kathy groaned, but between Mackenzie and Holly, they convinced her to join the men. It turned out to be a nice balance of old-timers and newcomers, terms Holly was already hearing less often. Everyone working together to prepare for the Winter Festival had done just what the planners had hoped, brought people together. The more they realized they had in common, the less they perceived each other as enemies. The mayor finally released them to return to the audience, and Holly couldn't help noticing how Ike would occasionally glance at Kathy. Holly knew her friend had a crush on him, but she couldn't decide if he returned her feelings or he was clueless, which was unfortunate because they would make an amazing couple. But maybe that came from Holly's own happiness. When Zack reached the table, she kissed his cheek. "See? That wasn't so bad. And now it's done. Let me see your plaque." As he handed it over, her phone vibrated on the table. She scowled, not wanting to answer it. Since it could be the hospital, she picked it up. It was from her father. Was he calling to tell her they had decided not to come after all? "Hello, Dad," she said, her voice flat.
"Holly," her father's voice crackled as with a poor connection, and she could hear a wind in the background. "We've crashed. Your mother—" Static sounds. "Conscious, but Ivy—" Static. "Trapped." Static. All the fire of Holly's anger and hurt turned to ice around her heart. With shaking hands, she put the phone on speaker and cried, "Where did you crash, Dad?" Everyone at the table went silent, and Ike whistled loudly. Zack had already stepped away and had his phone out. "We just passed mile marker 145 on static, but we slid static. Small hill. We're on our way," Zack said loudly into her phone. "Thank you. Static." The call dropped. "I've notified 911. Kathy, are you coming with us?" Zack asked, taking Holly's arm. "Has the state plowed that section of the highway?" Mark glanced at Ike, who asked, "Who plowed the parking lot here?" "I know who." Mackenzie dashed over to another man and quickly returned with a set of keys. "He said to try not to crash it, but it has a full tank of gas. You guys be careful." She threw her arms around Mark and then Ike. "I'm with you guys since I'm the only one of the three who knows the section of the highway," Kathy said, and they all hurried to the exit. Once Holly and Zack were on the road again, he asked, "Will you be okay?" "What happens if they die?" Holly whispered. "Let's pray they don't." So Holly did. All she could think was that, yes, her parents and sister had wronged her, but she still loved them. What if all these times her brother had contacted her, he'd reported back to them about how she was doing? Her father had said nothing about Brett, so he must not be with them. If Ivy had come without him, did it mean he was out of the picture? What if, because of Holly's hard heart, she had prevented any kind of reconciliation? She was glad Zack didn't make idle conversation, because her throat was tight, and she had to keep wiping tears from her cheeks. The road was still terrible, but she sent a prayer of gratitude for the friends in the pickup truck ahead, slowly clearing the worst of the snow. But she wished desperately that they could all drive faster. Zack fought down his frustration at the treacherously slippery road. He had to remind himself to be patient. It wasn't like he could get ahead of the other vehicle anyway. Fortunately, he had gassed up his truck before it started snowing, and he always carried emergency supplies. He worried about Holly's silence, but he didn't want to burden her with questions. As often as she wiped tears from her cheeks, he knew how heightened her emotions must be. Zack debated trying to distract her, but decided he should focus on getting her safely to her family. "I meant to ask before we left, but how long before other emergency responders arrive?" she asked. "Dispatch said there have been a ton of accidents and they'll send us help as soon as people are available. They also called the highway patrol, so if anyone was near the crash, they might get there first. Or not. I'm sorry." "That's okay." She gave him a weak smile. "It's what I've been thinking anyway." Her phone rang and she fumbled to answer it. "It's Kathy." Holly put the phone on speaker. "The highway marker's up ahead," Kathy said. "Mark wants to know if Zack has any amber filters for his spotlights." "Eagle Scout here," Zack reminded them. "Mark says he is too, but his filters are at the house." Kathy sounded worried. "The snow is so heavy, we'll need help to see where their car went off the road." "Should we start at the mile marker and work our way back?" Zack asked. "Wait!" Holly cried, waving to the right. "What's that? It's a light." "Stop!" Zack moved his foot from the accelerator and slowly pumped the brake, finally shifting to a lower gear. They still slid a little, but eventually came to a stop. Up ahead, Mark was doing the same thing with the other truck. "I'm so glad you know how to drive in snow," Holly said with a shaky voice. "Can you turn around or back up?" "I don't want to get stuck in the snow on the side," Mark said through Kathy's phone. "Let's try backing up." "You can back up, can't you, Jarvie?" "Why do you guys have to make everything a competition?" Holly asked, irritated, even though she knew they were trying to lighten the mood. "Yes," Kathy agreed. It took a few white-knuckled minutes, but they finally reached the spot where Holly had spotted the light. Zack had barely stopped before she was undoing her seatbelt. Wait for me. You don't do anyone any good if you fall and get hurt, too. And I need to get my lights."
Holly grumbled, but did as he said. The truck with the others had come to a stop, too, and Ike was lighting a flare to mark the spot for any other responders who might show up. Zack almost always carried emergency equipment in his truck since the hospital had begun training staff for emergency situations. And he had trained with Kathy. It was a good thing because he never knew where he might be when he would get a call from Mark or Ike about a medical rescue flight. The wind was blowing hard enough that it was difficult to hear if Holly's father was calling to anyone, but every once in a while he caught sight of the glow she had seen between the blustering snow. By the time he had the covers on the portable spotlights, the others had joined them. He handed them to the guys while he and Kathy pulled out the spine board.
"Let me break the path,"
Mark told Holly, who had already moved toward the light down the hill.
"My legs are longer, and I have a torch."
"No," Zack told him.
"You might re-injure that leg. You bring up the rear with the second light, and keep an eye on Holly, since the snow is so dang deep. Ike, you help Kathy with the spine board. I'll take the lead, since I have more experience with snow than Ike."
Mark looked about to argue, but he must have seen the frantic look on Holly's face and gave a curt nod. The trip down the hill ended up not being as treacherous as Zack had feared, because the car had already plowed a path. New snow had filled some ruts, but it wasn't as bad as breaking a path through the virgin snow. As he approached the sedan, he realized the glow they could see from the road came from the blinking hazard lights, and the vehicle was running. The first thing Zack did was go to the rear to make sure the snow hadn't blocked the exhaust pipe. It hadn't yet, but as heavy as it was snowing, it was a good thing they'd gotten there when they did. From the noise inside the car, Zack could tell they knew help had arrived. When no one opened the door, he guessed it must have frozen shut. He'd brought a window breaker if he needed to use it, but he would prefer to see the condition of the people inside before spraying them with glass. So he positioned himself and gave the door a couple of hard kicks and tried again. That time it moved a little. The others had joined him by then, and the three men were able to pry open the door.
"Oh, thank the Lord you've come,"
the man in the driver's seat cried. "Daddy!" Holly pushed her way to the car. Then they heard a siren.
"Looks like the cavalry has arrived," Ike quipped.
"They'll have better equipment," Kathy said.
"Let's get all the doors opened,"
Zack suggested. Mark pointed to where responders were already following their path.
"Let us help with that while you deal with the authorities."
Zack turned and headed up the hill, glad to recognize the people. Turning to descend with them, he brought the incident commander up to date with what they knew so far.
"Thanks for locating them," the man said. "It would have taken a lot longer without the flare. Don't you have a party to get back to? We've got this."
By the time Zack made his way downhill again, Mark and Ike had already retrieved the spine board, and Kathy had his first aid kit. "We're in the way here," she observed. "We should head back. Mackenzie will be worried."
Ike and Mark headed back up the hill with the board. "I want to stay with Holly,"
Zack said, feeling pulled in two different directions. "Don't worry," Kathy gave his shoulder a sympathetic pat. "We'll store your gear so you can take Holly to the hospital with you."
"Thank you."
Zack hurried to join her. When they pulled her twin sister from the car, she had regained consciousness but was confused. Her mother, who had an injured arm, hovered nearby.
"We should head back so you can be there when they arrive."
When Holly looked about to argue, he repeated Kathy's earlier statement.
"We're in the way here."
Reluctantly, Holly nodded, and the two of them worked their way back up to his truck. Chapter 9. As they made their slow return trip to Canyondale, Holly remained silent beside Zack. He could only imagine what kinds of thoughts she must be having, and probably beating herself up for. having remained estranged from her family for so long. And knowing the ex hadn't made the trip with them probably added to her guilt.
"Holly, what can I do to help?"
Zack finally asked as they crawled toward the hospital lights. The snow appeared to be slowing. "I'm so sorry." She put a hand on his leg. "I've been sitting here having a mental pity party. What if they had died?"
"But they didn't. And now you have a chance to heal things. Do you want to call your brother or wait until you have word about the exact state of their condition?"
"Oh, Jason." She fumbled in her purse, but then hesitated once she had the phone in her hands. "He's in Florida, so it's 2 hours later there. It could be a long time before we have a final diagnosis. Should I let him get some sleep before I call?"
"It probably depends on him. What do you think?"
"I would want to know, even if it meant a sleepless night," Holly said.
"I would too. But then I'm a spiritual man, and I'd be praying for them."
Zack shrugged.
"At the very least, your brother could send positive vibes out to the universe."
Good answer. Holly grinned for the first time since she had received the phone call. Besides, that sounds like something Jason would say. She woke her phone and placed the call. Zack tried to focus on the road, wondering how the appearance of Holly's family might change things. Would they push for her to return home? What would it mean for them as a couple if she wanted to live closer to her family? It usually took a little over 5 hours to get to Denver from Canyondale, so not a terrible drive, but not always an easy one either, depending on the weather, as evidenced by her parents' attempt today. "That went better than I expected," Holly said after disconnecting the call. "I promised to let him know as soon as I have more information on their conditions." "Oh, Zack, what if they had died and I hadn't fixed things with them?"
"You have to stop thinking that. But you may want to consider something before you talk to them,"
he said, choosing his words carefully. Brett. So she had already gotten there. Good.
"I keep asking myself how I would feel in your position if they had brought him with them."
Right. What if Brett not coming with them is because he and Ivy split up? The last I'd heard before breaking off all contact, they were talking about marriage. It honestly kind of blows my mind. I don't know how to have a normal family relationship with him between us. Holly rubbed her temples. But I still want to make peace. I'm tired of the anger and the bitterness and the hurt.
"You're in a tough position, and I wish I could take this pain from you."
Zack eased into a parking space at the hospital. "I wouldn't wish this on anyone I cared about." He killed the engine and shifted in his seat to face her.
"I can only offer you a healthy relationship to push the bad memories away."
Zack took her hand and brought it to his chest.
"More than anything in the world, I want to make you happy."
Tears glistened in her eyes. But before she could reply, the ambulance arrived, followed by a sheriff's vehicle, probably with Holly's dad.
"They got here fast. That's good."
Zack opened his door. He hurried around to help Holly on the slippery walk. Staff had kept the snow from getting too deep, but it was still slick to walk on. They even had a while you were sleeping moment where, slipping and sliding, they barely stayed on their feet. If not for the situation, it could have been funny. Once Zack and Holly stepped into the entry, both gave a sigh of relief. They stomped their feet on the rug and, holding hands, hurried to the front desk. "My sister and Mom are in the ambulance, and I'm guessing my father is close behind," Holly said. Dr. Miller stepped out of his office.
"I'm so sorry. You sit out here with Zack, and I'll make sure you're kept up to date on everyone's condition."
He frowned, taking in her still wet dress.
Why don't you change into some scrubs? I know you keep an extra set here.
Holly gave a dark chuckle. I've been too worried to pay attention. She turned to Zack. As if she was about to say something, she paused, frowning as she scanned his body. Your clothes are still wet, too. You should go home and change into dry clothes.
I'm not leaving.
Even though he'd worn snow boots, the depth of the snow had let it get inside. It was a good thing he'd put on a pair of wool socks one of his younger brothers had given Zack for Christmas last year. He took her hands in his.
Holly, I'm here for the long haul.
And he never meant any statement as much as he did this one.
Go change. Your family will need you.
With unease, Zack watched as Holly hurried away. What would he do if she left? He loved Canyondale again, now that the residents weren't at each other's throats anymore. And he hated large cities. Heck, Denver and the surrounding communities had a population close to that of the entire state of Utah. Would he be willing to live in a place he detested if it was the only way to keep Holly in his life?
Holly, the charge nurse said, peeking into the dressing room, Dr. Miller said you can talk to your father.
Thanks, I'll be right there. With shaking hands, she shoved her damp clothes into the locker and closed it. Fighting down her horribly conflicted feelings, she took a deep breath and went to face one of the people responsible for her biggest betrayal.
We've transferred your sister to the ICU, Dr. Miller said. Your parents are waiting for an x-ray of your mother's arm. It's likely broken, and your father hit his head. Most of the town folk have stayed home tonight, so we haven't been swamped. Would you like me to come in with you?
Dr. Miller offered kindly, his expression worried. Late one night, when things were quiet in the ER, Holly had confided in him about her wedding fiasco. His outrage on her behalf had been unbelievably satisfying. Thank you. She gave his cheek a quick kiss. But I almost lost them all tonight, so I have to do this.
All right.
Dr. Miller nodded toward the nurse's station.
We're here if you need anything.
Holly patted his arm, touched by his worry and support. It was a shame her own family hadn't been willing to give her the same thing. With resolve, she headed to the examination room. She carefully opened the door and paused, giving her parents time to realize she was there. Her mother lay on the examination table, while her father sat nearby holding her hand. He was the first one to see Holly and struggled to stand, a bruise already growing on his cheek where he must have hit the window or been struck when the airbag deployed. Sit. Holly hurried forward to put a hand on his shoulder, relief crossing his face.
Oh, Holly,
Mom cried from the bed, tears running down the side of her face. Memories of all the times her mother had comforted Holly or shared in a celebration pushed against the wall of pain she carried inside. She took the uninjured hand her father had released. He covered both, and the three of them sobbed. Holly was the first to get control of herself. She reached for a box of tissues and asked, "Why did you keep driving when the storm was so bad?"
Because your sister was desperate to see you.
Dad wiped his eyes and blew his nose. And now Ivy was in the ICU. You still should have waited until it was safe. But that's beside the point. I had no idea you knew where I lived. What could have brought you here? Her parents looked at each other, and her mother's lips trembled, tears running down her face again.
We came to tell you we were wrong.
Her father's voice was so choked with emotion, he could barely get the words out.
We want you to come home.
Holly stared at them, trying to get her brain to make sense of what they were saying. Of course, they had been wrong. After promising Holly his undying love, Brett had gone behind her back and stepped out with her sister. Holly rubbed her temples.
her twin sister. Somehow being twins made it worse because of the close connection they had once shared. "He deceived us all," her mother said with a sniff. Duh. A part of Holly wanted to lash out at them. Of course, Brett had deceived all of them. What had stunned her was how her parents justified what he and Ivy had done. They chose deceit and infidelity over honesty. Had they all really believed that if he cheated on Holly, he wouldn't eventually do the same to Ivy? Because that must have happened, and was why they had come. Holly prayed for the strength of discretion. There might come a time in the future when she could give voice to the pain she had carried for the last year, but the deep hurt they had inflicted on her didn't just go away because they said, "I'm sorry." And they wanted her to move back to Denver? Once upon a time, they all lived there happily. Holly had enjoyed residing close to her family. Until a year ago, it had always been her desire to live near her parents. So when she married and had a family of her own, at least half the grandparents would be close. Was there a chance she could reclaim that dream? Before she could decide what to say, 2 orderlies appeared at the open door with wheelchairs. "Hey, Holly," one of the young men said. "We're here to take the Richardsons to X-ray." Of course. Her emotions raw and exposed. She could barely speak. "I'll come back later." She turned and left the room. Zack paced the waiting room. From experience, he knew how long it could take to do any tests. He called his friends to let them know they'd made it safely to the hospital and to thank them again for helping track down the car. Suddenly, the door from the ER opened and Holly burst through it. He had barely turned toward her when she threw herself in his arms and sobbed. What had happened? As before, Zack just held her until she was ready to speak. She lifted her face to his gaze, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen, her cheeks wet. "Am I a horrible person?" Zack stiffened, fury growing inside him. What had those people said to her? He would give them a piece of his mind. He dropped his arms from around her, but Holly tightened her grip around his waist. "It's not them. It's me. Thank you so much for believing in me and coming to my defense. I can't tell you how important that is to me after what I've experienced at the hands of the people I thought loved me." He took her to a chair and sat down, pulling her onto his lap. "Tell me what upset you then." She buried her face in his neck and cried a little more. To keep his anger in check, Zack did some visualization. The police academy had taught several techniques to ease stress and calm down, something he needed at the moment. Holding Holly, he imagined his quiet place, inspired by a parcel of land he had seen some years ago overlooking the Green River. Trees provided shade for a log cabin, but this time he wasn't there alone. In Zack's mind, Holly came out of the door, dressed in comfortable clothes, her long hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. When he realized the bundle she held in her arms was a baby, his pulse went wild. In his arms at the hospital, Holly straightened. "What's wrong?" "Nothing at all." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Are you ready to talk?" Holly looked calmer now and nodded. She explained about her parents' request for her to return to Denver, just what Zack had feared. "I'll come with you," he said without hesitation, "if that's okay with you." A crease formed between her brows. "To visit my family?" "No, if you move back to Denver." "Oh, Zack, you hate big cities. I remember you talked about it all those years ago at camp, and you've mentioned it more than once since I moved here." Holly cupped his cheeks. "You would hate it." "Not if you were there." "You would do that for me?" The muscles in his stomach tightened, but he nodded. I told you, I'm in this for the long haul. Well, look at that, Dr. Miller called from the nurse's station. When they glanced at him, they found him pointing up at the mistletoe hanging from the ceiling, his eyebrows arched expectantly. I mean, Holly, Zack said, his voice soft and full of the vision he just had of the cabin and what it said about a future with her. I want to be wherever you are. That's good. She leaned her forehead against his. Because I feel the same way about you, and I want it to be right here in Canyondale. Kiss her, the charge nurse urged. So Zack lowered his mouth to meet hers. Those warm, sweet, tender lips tasted like cherry and love. Chapter 10. Zack hurried over to help his father carry in additional chairs for their traditional Christmas dinner. It was a good thing his parents' home had room for a large gathering, because between his siblings, their spouses and children, and Holly and her family, they would certainly have a full house. Her sister had awakened a couple of hours after his and Holly's mistletoe kiss, and the doctors had allowed Ivy to leave the ICU the next day. Her parents had found a vacant hotel room. Considering how most rooms were usually booked, Zack put his good luck to how many of the workers at the technology center had left for the holiday break. He had accompanied Holly when she spoke with her sister. It would take time, and probably a lot of work and prayer, for Holly to fully forgive her family. But at least she wanted to try now. The relationship might never be the same again, but he had faith they would forge a new one. I like Holly, his father said with a sly grin. Dad's gaze darted to each of the half-dozen different locations the family had hung mistletoe. This year, it seemed, anyone going through a doorway was in danger. They usually had one or two strands hanging in strategic locations, but this was excessive. Not that Zack minded. His family was already getting used to how often he kissed Holly. I like her too, Zack said, stating the obvious. Are you sure she's up to spending Christmas with her family? Dad asked, worried. Zack loved how his folks and siblings had embraced Holly and her situation, yet still welcomed her relatives. They all shared a firm belief that family bonds should be maintained and strengthened, where it was possible and healthy. It's a good place to start, especially with so many of us around. You know how good Mom is at changing the subject. Zack laughed. Sadly, your mother learned to do that with my family. Some of them just had no filters at all and could make everybody uncomfortable. Your Holly has just been through a lot, and we want to do what we can to help her. Thanks, Dad. I did offer to go with her to pick them up, but she said she had this. At the familiar sound of her car, Zack grinned. That must be her. He dashed to the front door and pulled it open to the unusually warm weather, which had already reached 60 degrees. Holly was opening the back door for her sister. Ivy had suffered a concussion and a bit of memory loss, which the doctor said might be a good thing since she didn't remember the accident at all. Zack hurried over to open the door for Mrs. Richardson. She had dislocated her shoulder and would likely require surgery for a torn rotator cuff once they returned to Denver. Hopefully the sling would keep her from hurting too much. The family planned to go back the next day. Let's get you inside and comfortable, his mother said, hurrying out the front door. She and Dad had insisted on taking charge of Holly's parents to protect her from the pressure they kept putting on her to come back to Denver. One of Zack's older sisters stepped forward to guide Mrs. Richardson up the front steps. Your folks are taking such good care of me, Holly said, wrapping an arm around Zack's waist. That's what Jarvies do. They went up the porch steps. It's a family tradition, even when we're battling among ourselves.
I like your family traditions. Eyes twinkling, she glanced at the sprig of mistletoe at the top of the door jamb.
So do I.
Zack pulled her close and covered her mouth with his, moving her soft lips against his. Holly surprised him with the intensity of her response. It was like all the years when he'd been alone, never connecting with anyone else. He was in a cocoon, waiting for Holly to step into his life again. Warmth grew in his chest, and he deepened the kiss. An image of Holly greeting him like this at his imaginary cabin. Forever. This has been Mistletoe Rescue by Donna K. Weaver, narrated by Vicki Pierce. Copyright 2024 by Donna K. Weaver. Production copyright by Donna K. Weaver.